So I want to talk about The Drowned Woods. I always take notes when I read books. It helps me review them, when I go back on like Goodreads or whatever. And I know all of this isn't very enjoyable to look at, but it's all I have for right now until I get more equipment and whatever. So sorry about the background, but it's all I have. Anyway, I have a very cool, like, special edition. It came with one of the book boxes. Unfortunately, I don't remember which one. It was either like the Bookish box or Owl Crate, something like that. I was trying them out, and actually, this wall hanger tapestry that I put up to separate the light came from one of those boxes. It was part of the like a folklore wood theme, which I adore because everybody knows Robin Hood is my favorite story. So I wanted to put this up on my wall immediately. I just don't have a place for it yet. But this edition, it has a different cover, which I think is more aesthetically pleasing than the original cover. It has, art in the side. There's art in the dust jacket. There's a beautiful embellished title. I'm so careful because I'm always careful with my books. I don't like to bend the pages or hurt them or anything. I don't even break the spine. That's why I'm handling it so gently. There's art on the back. Yeah, you see? And it is signed. It is a signed edition. And I will say, even though I feel like my notes always lean towards the more critical, even though I always enjoy the stories that I read. I feel like there's no such thing as a bad book. It just depends on, it could be simple as the mood I'm in. It could be just tired from reading the same genre. It could literally be anything. But I do know I did enjoy it. So I don't want people to think just because I have critical notes that I didn't enjoy the book. I did. Let's talk about the plot first. I'm always fascinated with the idea of elemental powers. I'm a water element myself, being a Cancer, so I'm kind of sapping this up when I found out it was one of those water power element books. It takes place in Old Wales, actually, and they refer to it as the Highlands, so it's nice to have something based in a different area and not the same old, like, New York, or it takes me out of the story when I read things like that. So it was nice to be able to explore different legends of a different area. For fans of the fairy folk, the Fae and the Seelies and things like that, we have plenty of that in here. It's sort of essential to the plot, but the book does a good job of keeping it very mysterious. Like, without them, the plot can't happen, but they're not actively involved in it. Let's just say that. It's more resigned for our characters, our two main characters. So Prince Geraint here rules over Gwaelod, and he has high ambitions of warring with the Fae folk. They're called the Twelfth Teg in this rendition. They have doe black eyes, they dress like with moss, and they wear berries for necklaces. They're pretty much the embodiment of nature, as classic fairies are. Like every other tradition, though, the fair folk, they don't like iron. Even iron chains can stop magic, and they make a note that the stories about child snatching can't be true because they don't leave the forest to even be around that much iron in the cities. So that's a detail that I really enjoy watching them unfold upon, is that the iron comes into play a lot because there's so much of it. But because of that, they get the other people, like Fane, to do their bidding when they can't get close to the iron, But they are in the habit of making deals and lending out magic in return for good service. That's something else I enjoyed because, what was it? The book Enchantment of Ravens. I gave that one 5 stars, and that's something I usually don't do for a YA. But just the idea of getting to see creativity of that, a deal can be made with people who have power. That's interesting. So Mare, our main character, was taken by the prince at a very young age because he employs diviners. He used her power for something so evil that she decided to flee. You know, she didn't agree with what he was doing, and it made her feel like crap. She was caught later on and branded with the prince's mark of being a criminal, and so she's constantly been on the run since then and self-conscious about her branding and hiding it. That's where we first see her. Gwaelod's walls are protected from magic users, since the previous prince traded with King Aron of the 12th Teg, and so Mary goes along with the party. That's their goal, to find the source of his magic, which happens to be the prince as well. Those spoilers actually weren't too bad. So when they get to the well, the guy we all suspected was evil turned out to be evil, and instead of the walls, the whole town or the city is in danger of being flooded now. So she has to change her whole plan, help her ex, help the prince, and all to save innocent people and hold the tides back, which is very hard, and maybe the only thing she was certain that she couldn't do, because the salt in the ocean makes it more resistant to magic. Like, it's the biggest challenge of a water bender. But in the end, everyone ends up happy. Okay, she gets with Fane and did the thing. They spend all book in this manner that makes Fane look like a good friend, and they do share some emotional moments and let their guard down. But things get complicated when Ifana comes into the picture. Fane just kind of steps into the background, and there's even like a whole 4 pages of a fight where they don't mention him at all. Like, they forget that he's been standing there the whole time. He didn't even join the battle or nothing. And later on, when they remember him, he gives an excuse like, "Oh well, I'm more of a lover than a fighter." But I feel like he was pushed aside intentionally. I don't know. It's just weird that, like, after building him up, they throw in her. But I guess that's realistic though when you think about your exes. I used to have a saying that exes always come back because they seem to have a way of just inputting themselves where they're not invited. Let's just say that. I do appreciate though that they wanted to make someone strong enough not to go back to their ex, because it's incredibly hard to do, especially when you think that you've cut them off and then they show up again, and then after a while you forget the details, but you remember the good feeling, like how you felt, should I say. So it's incredibly hard not to be tempted to go back into that lifestyle where everything was nice and comfortable before you got learned. And a lot of the plot has been set up so that she can reveal more and more about what happened between them, and Renfrew trying to use that like as her weakness because he wants to use her for her powers. And that's another running theme, is that she thinks everybody just wants to use her as a weapon, but she slowly realizes that her actual friends don't care about that as much as, wanting to be a friend. There's supposed to be other characters too. I mean, there's a super cute corgi that tags along for the whole book, and he sneezes when magic is around. I thought they were going to use that, as a plot point, but they didn't. I just thought it would be a cool idea if, like, they meet somebody sinister who's trying to be tricky, and then he sneezes, and then it gives him away. That would have been a good idea. There's Griff, there's Emmerich. They're given reasons for being there, like, as part of the group, but they quickly kind of get forgotten too. One of them dies pretty early on, actually. This is the effect I like to bring up in a lot of books. It's the same thing in movies. You need more than one character to make it feel populated and lived in, but with too many to write at once, it takes up a lot of time and space trying to make everyone part of every single conversation and respond to every event. Like in TV shows, they always come up with excuses for that character to leave so they don't have to write extra dialogue and plot for someone who just happened to be there. Like, they'll make it all about one character who's trying to do something, and they'll have an excuse for the other one to need to leave to go somewhere else. I feel like it wants to be a fantasy book, but it's restricted by YA boundaries. Romance, which is unfortunate for a lot of YA books, because I feel like I've leveled up past YA, so I'm always pretty harsh on it, and I don't mean to be. It's just that when I think fantasy, I expect adventure. I don't want to say adult things, because adult fantasy doesn't have the creativity of the world that YA books has. But YA is restricted. You know, they have to play to making the characters look good and romance before the plots. But I do like what the climax, you know, with her having to hold back the tides. But there's a part at the end that I really, really hate. When somebody dies, you know, I hate that, like, they make it a big dramatic scene, like it was a sacrifice, and then a couple pages later, they're suddenly okay again and not dead at all. It takes so much away from what's supposed to be a sacrifice. And so just to throw her with someone at the end and say they lived happily ever after means that it wants us to be happy for that character, but it's a boring story. Well, I always say that YA is scared to let bad things happen to their characters or make them do bad things because they're scared that they won't be liked. But I'd rather have a good story than have good characters. You know, it's like this book tries to be manipulative about being in the middle between good and bad because they want the characters to seem cool, you know, but they make them do good things at the same time. I don't know, you know. I feel like it's more realistic because people do get jealous. People do things sometimes that are mistakes, you know. And of course we get Ifana with that, but she's kind of played to as one of the most likable characters in this book. When she comes in, she overtakes all the other characters and they get pushed aside immediately because this plot is the most important. Okay? Actually, I was more interested in seeing more of the Fae. I wanted to see more of the mysterious magic and the deals that go on in there. But it's more of a huge focus on slow burn, you know, for those who are interested in that. Let's talk about the characters. So did you know that the name Merid apparently means pearl in Welsh? How fitting is that? That's really cool. I did not know that. Her powers are in high demand. And I was trying to figure out why, because apparently all diviners exist. It's not like she's the only one. I'm a bit sad that we didn't get to see her fight another diviner. Like, that would have been fun. What if she would have had to fight somebody who had the same powers as her? They focus more on her kind of sneaking around and having trouble fighting people with iron, like guards. And they want to use her being a thief, which I'll get into more of that. There are other diviners, though. Like, there's a stone diviner that was mentioned, for example. I kind of wanted to see that. And then they even mentioned that a prince killed all the other water diviners just because he wanted her the most. But how could he know that he have gotten them all? I don't understand. I mean, there's more than one. Why did he just employ them? They might be easier to control. I don't know, okay? But she reminds me of Elsa. Most of her attacks come in the form of ice, which is understandable because water can only do so much. Even though I feel like if you wanted to kill somebody, she could easily drown them by filling their lungs up. They mentioned that once, and I appreciate that they don't want to use the same idea twice. So we gotta come up with something different every time. Even though, I mean, realistically, if it works, it works. Am I right? So why do they call them diviners anyway? They don't divine anything. Someone actually pointed that out in the book, and there's other names for diviners, but they stick with that one. She was born to superstitious old folk who lived like outside of town, and it was raining one night. The rain avoided her. That was the first sign that she was special. You know, they tried to hide her to keep her presence away from the prince, but it's not possible. She can do literally almost anything with water. She can freeze it, which she carries a flask of water for that. She can control it. And her first self-defense attempt actually came from sucking up the water from the mossy, wet forest floor. As long as she concentrates, water can be found anywhere. Even from the sweat in your eyes, the veins. I mean, we are made up of 98% water, and that's really cool to watch them draw elements from anything around when they desperately need it. Yes, but people often underestimate the element of water because it's always used for feminine characters and as a healer role. But I like that the book shows that water doesn't always have to be gentle. It changes, you know, it's like the tide, it's deep, it's emotion, it's a storm. But there is a cost for using too much of those powers. It says wind diviners can suffocate, you know, fire diviners can freeze, and water apparently can drown. You know, it can backfire. So she's got to drink every now and then just to replenish herself, as you might say. I like that. That makes sense. And it adds some rules to a system. I like that. Myrrh has a habit of doing things just to be contrary. It's mentioned over a couple of times. But I do like that she has made the choice of survival and turned down Renfrew's offer in favor of running. It's instincts like that that make us human, and it might be the most relatable choice in this book. She also feels torn between Gwaelod and her home. She hates the prince for what he made her do, but she grew up there, you know, after being taken. But instead of apologizing, she offers trade of information. She's small, she evades, and she blends in. There's always two escapes for her. She's kind of what I would call a glass cannon. Her attacks can be powerful, but she can be stopped with just even the smallest piece of iron. The iron thing seems to be the only thing that's set in stone. She can use the mist to make a cover of fog, but she can't use magic on the guards because they're specifically wearing armor. That's iron. There's also a part in here I don't like at all. She's supposed to be this super thief that joins a thieves guild where she meets her ex-girlfriend at some point. And the romance, the nostalgia, that's nice. But I really dislike that she's supposed to be on par with people who've done this their whole lives. Like, he stole a hairpin from the Queen of Thieves. Okay, I'll talk more about that later. Fane is the second, main-ish character. His point of view starts in a fighting ring, which makes sense when we find out what we know about him later on, but it also doesn't make sense the more his personality starts coming out. He has the power of iron. He can sense weapons, he can sense blood, and he was losing the fight on purpose to raise the odds of a bet. There's a part in the beginning where he's talking to a girl, and it's kind of annoying because it's like an NPC trying to explain their whole personal story, but it's somebody who won't even stick around for more than a couple pages. It's just telling and telling. If it's not important enough to show it, do we really need to hear it? Especially for someone who's not even, the characters that get introduced, you don't know if they're there for a second or if they're gonna stay. And they usually don't stay. It's kind of like being stuck behind a register while a random NPC starts going on about something completely irrelevant. Anyway, Fane calls his powers a curse. He and Trevor, the corgi, everyone assumes is a spy for the other folk. He lived on the east side, on the borders of Anowin, and his father was a blacksmith. He made him an iron key to wear around his neck, and his mother said it would protect him from the other folk since they lived so close. Since they lived literally next door to them. And one day his father turned down a commission of 6 or 7 mercenaries, so they came back later on in retaliation and burned his house down, which is an overreaction if you ask me. But they killed everyone, and he was out and about, just happened to be, and it was too late to help or save anybody. He ran away into the forest, and eventually he found employment working in the mountains as an iron fetch for the Fae. And what that means is they enchant him with the ability to sense iron, and he would remove any traces of iron from the forest so that they didn't have to get close to it. And this included a lot of bodies, since we all have iron in our blood. They actually entered into a deal, 7 years of service for 7 lives, since that's, how many people he wanted dead at the time. But strangely, it doesn't have to be those 7 people, it just has to be any 7 lives. He's not even a true diviner, he's enchanted by the Fae. Others can feel it, the elements around them, and they each have their own way. Some, the temperature drops, but for Fane, it's music. And it's a common occurrence that whenever iron is around, he can hear it sing. He set out for revenge 2 days in a row, barely stopping to eat. He was tracking them down using a piece of a sword that was left behind, but when he got there, he saw that the man had a family now, and that killing them would just be selfish. It wouldn't bring his family back, and the kids would just feel the same way he does when it happens to them. His mother taught him right, and I admire that way of thinking. He was devastated that he came all the way to do nothing, that there was nothing he could do for his grief. It's the old saying about revenge. You can start by digging 2 graves. The magic activates on its own. It drives him into a blind rage when it does, and iron sings out when, the more blood there is. But his personality flaw trait is that he's hesitant to kill. He doesn't want to overkill, and he thinks about that person's life, who they are, if they have a family, and I really enjoy that mindset. Because oftentimes in books, they make it look really easy to kill somebody. And, in reality, it's just not. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the others think he's weak for choosing not to kill. But he stays out of a lot of the fights for that reason. Even the smallest touch can activate it, so he stays away from people and tries not to take that chance. The power of death is a huge responsibility. He's careful in judging who lives or dies, and he's constantly concerned about everyone they encounter. Like when a random cook died. He felt awful. He didn't even know her name. And it literally stopped him in his tracks for like a whole 2 minutes while he sat there thinking about the life that he just took. Well, it wasn't his fault, but, by proxy. He's quick to defend somebody without fighting if he can help it. He even took a hit for the corgi. And since an iron lock being activated, realizing when it was a trap being set, and the iron of heartbeats is softer than weapons. He uses his senses a lot, especially touch, because he's careful about the activation of magic. He can't even sleep in the city. The noises are too loud. He's so used to the outskirts of a farming town, the quiet, open skies of the wilderness, and he even hoped Tamara could see it one day and be at peace. Speaking of Maren Fane, there is a difference in power between him and her. She was born with magic. He traded years of his life in service for it. And it raises a good argument. Do people born with it not appreciate it as much? She's hesitant to use it because she doesn't like that it defines her. And he doesn't like to use it because he doesn't like to hurt people. When they first meet, Fane is incredibly reserved and well-mannered to her, but she has a hard time trusting and warming up to him. She says that monsters who hide in the day are worse, but she trusts the way that he treats the corgi. Because how we treat people who have less power than us show us who they really are. And I agree with that. She thinks Fane has a soft heart, and not in a good way. She wonders if he'll even be able to go through with it if he hesitates breaking into a house. And I think there's a difference between trying to kill somebody who's trying to kill you and breaking into some random innocent person's house. She was ready to kill somebody until he stopped her, even though they were the ones who sneaked into their house. How does she think she's right in this situation? But she realized it, and she felt bad that she'd just been thinking about him as another tool for an end instead of a person, just like she hated that they were doing to her. Let me try to pronounce this one. Ivana Verk Aldethmaden. She's someone I thoroughly enjoy. She's the daughter of one of 2 women who rule the Thieves Guild. She's cool, she smiles and smirks a lot, she has twitchy hands, and she tries to make fun wherever she is. If you're there, you might as well enjoy yourself, right? There's a whole thing about the Thieves Guild that I don't really like, which is strange because I'm always the rogue. I'm the thief. Every time game comes up, I love the trope too. But it seems like it was just an excuse to put the trope in the story. Just like the whole hairpin thing. Her mother wanted her to take more responsibility. So when Mare tried to flee from the guild because they saw her brand as being a gold mine, they could just turn her into the prince and get the money. Ivana thought it would be fun to take her in. The guild actually pays the prince to work in town in exchange for a blind eye, which is also strange because I don't understand how the royal people are going to let thieves be the second most powerful influence in the city. Does that make sense? Guild actually takes up its own section of the book. It seems out of place. But people think rogues are cool, so, they just wanted to make thieves a thing. But Ivana uses violence as a last resort. which is kind of bullshit because Mare gives Fane a hard time about not wanting to kill. But Mare doesn't say nothing when Ifana does it. Ifana's fear actually is fury. And it's kind of the same as Fane's, because she can't control it. She likes to control the outcome by playing it cool, joking around, and staying calm. You know, in a way, they're both in a fear of being out of control. I do feel bad for her, though, because of the past. And, you know, when the guards came suddenly, they all immediately thought of Ifana. And in the past, she betrayed Mare by selling her out to the prince. But it was later found out that she was a good person and she was doing it to save everyone else. And eventually Mare came to respect that, but she can't forgive that. It goes back to what I said about afraid to making your characters look bad. We have a thief, but it's also a good guy. I don't know. I just kept reading, okay? But the part I feel bad about is when you do something like she does, you know, how long do you have to go before they let it go? Once you make a mistake like that, your partner never looks at you the same anymore. And you can't just say, you know, oh, it's been long enough, just let it go already. And, you know, seeing them together was nice, but it's understandable why they could actually never be together again. Mare wouldn't even let Ifana take dead people's jewelry. One hand, okay, I'm 50-50 about this. On one hand, it's wrong, yeah. But in another situation like this, I think it's actually perfectly okay. It's the classic cog, you know. They don't want her to look bad, but they're trying to stay true to the cool thief trope. I get it. They were under sewers, in the middle of nowhere. Who knows how long the people have been down there. It's not like it's grave robbing. But Mare accused Ifana of only being in it for the gold, and Ifana gets rightly pissed at this. Even though Mare actually tempted her into the mission by proposing the reward as being gold. Ifana, you know, realized that Mare had grown harder, but that's what happens when their emotions are tuned against you. And Ifana had even hoped that Mare would come looking for revenge just so she could have a chance to see her again. And I like that, because that's what I was talking about before, about how, you know, your exes are always a stain in your life. So there's a lot of tension, because Mare's angry, but they need her skills. She tempts her. They don't know what's even in the well or what it's about, but they know that they're doing this. I think it's supposed to be some kind of redemption arc for Ifana, even though she only joins about 3/4 of the way. So I don't know if we had enough time to actually feel that. And I guess it's more screen time than the other two got. Emmerich and Griff. I'm not going to talk about them. Now, let me talk about the negative petty things. Just petty things. Renfrew leaving the group to go get someone seems like an excuse just to have to write less characters together. You know, it's that what I was talking about before about too many characters in a room, too many people to write dialogue for. They just wanted to get Renfrew out because they don't care about him right now. The other characters and the side characters. I mean, they seem important at first. They have names, they have personalities, they have backstories, but they die so quick that they literally could have been taken out of the story and made no impact on it whatsoever. There are too many concepts that could have had their own time and their own book, like their own storyline. The other diviners that we never got to see, the Fae bargains, you know, Fane going back and confronting that. Or we can learn more about Trevor. I would have liked to see that history about the stone diviner who's making the wizard or whatever. I don't know. I mean, it was cool. Yeah, it was Kyra Widno. It was said to be made by tricking a sorcerer at a coin toss. Now, I would have wanted to see that. Also, it was kind of annoying, but not like too, just super petty. Was that right after Fane was in his flashback and he walked away from killing the family. He didn't get to kill a family, so he didn't get to display his powers. And then, like, he turns around and runs into a group of random bandits that try to kill or attack him, so he has no choice but to use his powers. I mean, it seems like just an excuse to show us what his abilities do, but it couldn't fit into the story with him happening upon the family. Also, There was one point where they pulled a candle out of their pocket. I mean, it could be done. My biggest gripe though is about the Thieves Guild, okay? It's like I wouldn't have a problem if it was just Ifana, you know, and that they maybe slightly mentioned that she was part of the Thieves Guild. But they tried to bring a whole story's worth into the last 3/4 of the book. But they tried to make Mare everything. You know, she couldn't just be a water diviner on the run. She had to be a diviner, a badass assassin who always has weapons out. You know, she had to be a super great thief who's better than the actual thieves. She was a spy master's apprentice, you know. And she could have met Ifana another way. Why did she have to be a thief too? And like I don't want to call her Mary Sue, but it's like they tried to make her, if they just make her as good as everybody else, then why do you need everybody else? You know, there wasn't enough time for her to just be a spy master. Like, I hope that's understandable what I'm trying to say. I just don't know how to say it. Like, I like the Thieves Guild, I just don't like it being in this book when we don't have time for that. That's all I have for this book. Am I supposed to rate it now? I mean, I don't know. Let me go back and count my negatives and positives. 43 positive and 30 negative. And negative is used lightly. Because like I said, it's not really negative. It was just petty stuff. Hey, looking it up, 3.4 out of 5. You know, that's basically 3.5 stars. That's about what I feel is right for this book. You know, I didn't hate it, but I would put it under a list if somebody wanted to request books about elemental powers. This would be high up on my list for water ones, because that's what got me hooked and interested in it. I'd like to know what you think.